Hey, it's Tom from Ordeal, and if you want to know my 5 top tips for how to get a better mix, then you better keep watching. So, my first tip for everyone, tip number 1, you need to high pass everything. Even if you're not high passing at maybe 500 Hz, even if it's a bass guitar or a kick drum where you want to keep most of the low frequencies, high pass it. Figure out the lowest frequency that it can reproduce and stop there. Everything below that, it can't reproduce it, so any noise beneath that is exactly that, it's noise. It's going to take up your headroom and it's going to remove any kind of mixing stuff. It could trigger your compressor. You sometimes get like frequencies at 1 to 5 Hz. These can trigger your compressor and you of course cannot hear them, so you can only really identify them on a visual EQ meter or something. So one of the good things about high passing is, let's say you've got a singer and a bass guitar. You know that by high passing just beneath the singer's lowest note, not only is that freeing up headroom by removing noise, it also means that whole frequency range beneath is now exclusively owned by the bass guitar and the bass frequencies. This means that they're not competing with anything, and in a sense, you're not mixing them with anything. And so that saves a lot of mixing time when you're only trying to edit a sound by itself in its own frequency range. And this moves me on to my next point. Point number 2 is separating frequencies. So obviously we've done the high passing, but we still have instruments in the same frequency range. Let's say we've got a pianist and a singer, or guitarist and a singer. The guitar and singer are going to be playing the same notes at some point, same frequencies occupied. So we need to figure out what is at the forefront, and this is usually the singer. So what we need to do, figure out singer's frequencies, dip that on the guitar or the piano. We also need to know the extremities of the singer's frequencies, the main ones, and let's say they finish up about 700 Hz, pulling that number out of the air. We now know that we can boost the guitar a little bit more above 700 Hz, and the singer is still going to be hit hard. We also know if their lowest notes are in the 200s range, we can boost the guitar up beneath 200 Hz, and the guitar almost engulfs the singer's voice while there's a big space carved out for the singer. So this means the singer's right in the forefront, and when you compress them together, they don't trigger each other with the clashing frequencies as much. Okay, point number 3. The 3 compressor rule. This is probably a rule someone else uses as well, but it is one that I've not actually seen online, and this is just a rule that I go by because I found it works best. On any given sound, you want only 3 layers of compression. So what do I mean by this? Because people say you want as little compression as possible, but I divide my compression staging into 3 parts. The individual sound, getting it compressed as a group, for example, compressing individual drum hits if needed, compressing the drum bus as a whole, and then obviously the final compression on the master. So by doing this, you're not over compressing any sound, you're allowing some dynamic range while also reducing the transients, which you need to do if you're adding a compressor. And by limiting it to 3, you know that you might have 3 gentle stages of compression, which allow you to not over compress everything. I also try and aim to have 3 instead of 1 or 2, because it's always much more transparent to have several stages of light compression instead of 1 stage of hard compression. And so 3 I found to be the perfect balance. Too little means you have to compress it harder, too much more and it means you've just got more compression overall, and it's a lot harder to keep subtle. Okay, point number 4. This is one of my favourite tricks because I don't have a very high powered computer, and it actually saves me a lot of stress and worry because my computer doesn't go on fire. This tip may be not relevant to people in certain DAWs because it might be more built in, but certainly for users of Reaper, where you can add effects to each individual channel, it can be very helpful. So let's say you're adding reverb to 5 out of the 10 instruments in your project. Let's just say like vocals, couple guitars and maybe some violins. It's going to be a cool song, right? You don't actually need to add a reverb to each different track, because not only do you risk having different sounding reverbs, you also have maybe 5 times as much CPU power. All you need to do is create an extra track, name it reverb, and then send all your instruments to it. This means that they're all in the same room, as in they're all going through the same reverb, so they're perceived as in the same environment. And it also tidies things up a bit. You can play about, if you don't like the reverb in a track, you've only got one track to edit. If you want to sidechain the reverb channel, you can do that. You don't need to sidechain each individual track. You can just sidechain the reverb channel and you leave the dry mixes intact. And you can obviously control how much reverb each track has by just adjusting the send level. So obviously this point doesn't stray into the realms of exclusivity for reverb. However, reverb is what I mainly use this for. Other effects that I use buses for include stuff like delays and certain kind of glitch effects where I'm sending a bunch of tracks into a bus. I'm putting some glitch on them, I'm putting some reverb, maybe a bit of delay, and then maybe I can high pass it or gate them, and this can give all sorts of cool build up effects. You may remember my video how to make harder drops. This is stuff like automation, and it relies heavily on having a separated and dedicated effects bus, which of course you can have more than one depending on which effects you're doing, but it's always worth just having a couple for the tidiness and also the clarity of your mix, because you never want too many effects. Tip number 5. This is of course the final one, so it's the most important one, and maybe everyone's going to groan when I say it because everyone says it on forums, everyone says it across Reddit, on Facebook and everything, and it is of course use a reference track. So this is, you decide what track you want yours to sound like. So it could be any track you want, but it's always best to use the same kind of genre as your style. There's no point going for a Johnny Cash track when you're going for a hardcore rhythm dubstep track, because the EQs are going to be different. Johnny Cash has quite toned down sub-bass lines and wobbles compared to dubstep. So always go for the same style of music and also the same effect you want. You want to make sure you're using a reputable producer. You've not just taken some, I don't know, YouTube rip of some 12-year-old who's made a track. So make sure it's a good quality track you're referencing, because that way even if your speakers or headphones aren't quite as good as they should be, you have a reference point to say, well, if it's not as good as this, and this is what it can sound like on my system, then I know I need to do better. You can also do stuff like matching the EQs. Certain plugins do that, or if they don't, you can do that with an EQ plugin and just a very good ear and some focus. So that was my 5 top tips. I have of course missed many tips and tricks out of this video. There's no way I could include all 2 million of them. So if you have any particularly good tricks that you want to include, then please put them in the comments. Please make sure the people watching can see them, because everyone creates content when they're watching YouTube and commenting. Everyone helps out. And so also if you've got any questions, you know, everyone's able to help out. I'm going to be in the comments, so I'll reply to you. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and do subscribe to the channel if you find this stuff helpful, because it helps me out too. It means I get to work harder, gives me a bit of inspiration to make more videos. Thank you for watching.